Welcome back to another video. Today we'll be looking at an aggressive weapon for black against white's very first move, pawn to d4. So, if you're a d4 player looking to prepare for sharp lines, or if you're searching for a fighting response as black, this video is exactly what you need. The opening we'll explore is a fascinating and tricky choice, the Englund Gambit. In this gambit, black sacrifices the central pawn right from the start. I have to admit, for a long time I thought this move was highly dubious, maybe even just incorrect for black, since it seemed to rely only on one simple trap. But the truth is, there is a lot more to it than meets the eye. But I have discovered a much better way of playing it, and that is exactly what I'm going to share with you today. Usually, when white plays the pawn to the d4 square, they are aiming for a more positional and strategic type of game. They do not want to be attacked right from the beginning. In contrast, if white begins with the pawn to the e4 square on move 1, then the position immediately becomes sharper and more dynamic. In those cases, black has a wide variety of options, such as the Sicilian defense, the Scandinavian defense, and many other variations that allow very active play. However, against the pawn to the d4 square, I personally struggled for quite some time to find an aggressive opening that works well for black. And then I discovered this line, the Englund Gambit. At first sight, it looks completely ridiculous. We are simply giving up a pawn in the very center for no apparent reason. That is why most players think the Englund Gambit is a poor choice for black. The usual way people try to play it is by developing the knight to the c6, then bringing the queen to the e7, and just hoping that white falls into a trap. But what I am suggesting to you is a completely different story. After white accepts the pawn sacrifice, instead of trying to set up some cheap trick, we are simply aiming for quick development and long-term attacking chances. So, here we play the pawn to the d6 square, inviting white to continue capturing pawns. And when they do that, which is the most common move played by white, we recapture with the bishop. Now the position looks very much like a classical gambit. If you think about different gambits, usually the idea is to sacrifice a pawn in order to speed up development, to open lines, and to create attacking chances. That is exactly what we are doing here, only this time with the black pieces. Normally, gambits are easier to play with white, because having that extra tempo makes it faster to launch an attack. But here, we are flipping the situation around and preparing to attack right away as black. With this pawn sacrifice, we have already achieved several things. First, we are ahead in development since we already have one piece developed. Second, the position now has a lot of open lines for our pieces, so we can bring them into the game very quickly, while white will need more time to catch up. That gives us a lead in development and the chance to start an immediate attack. Now, let us see what happens next. For example, if white plays knight to the f3 square or makes any other developing move, we simply continue by developing our other knight to the c6 square. By the way, here is a little note. We develop the queen side knight first because, generally speaking, it is part of our overall plan to castle on the queen side. That is why we want to bring the queen side pieces out as early as possible. Castling there will not only keep the king safe, but it will also directly support our attacking strategy. We will see this in action in just a moment. Now, after white develops the knight to the c3 square, we continue developing our queen side pieces as well. We bring the bishop to the g4, placing it on an active diagonal where it immediately begins to put pressure. Usually, white will respond with the pawn to the e3, trying to reinforce their knight. If they choose a different move, I will also show you how to handle that. But for now, after the pawn to e3, we stick to our plan. We continue developing our queen side pieces by placing the queen on the e7. On the very next move, we are fully ready to castle on the queen side. So for example, if white plays bishop to the e2, we go ahead and castle queen side. At this point, not only is our king safe, but our rook is now activated on an open file, perfectly placed to start generating threats right away. Now, in this position, there is a very instructive way for white to lose quickly. It actually comes from the second most commonly played move here, where white simply castles. On the surface, it looks like a completely natural move. After all, we have just castled, so white wants to castle as well. But in this case, castling is actually a losing mistake. I would like to pause here and ask you to think about it. How would you continue as black in this position? Write your ideas in the comments below. Normally, castling is considered a safe move, but here it turns out to be the wrong choice for white. So, let us roll back that move and look at what white usually plays instead. The most popular move in this position is bishop to the d2. Even though castling is still played quite often, it is in fact a losing mistake, while bishop to the d2 is the standard continuation. Now you simply continue by developing the knight to the f6. White castles. And believe it or not, in this position you are already almost winning. It may sound surprising, because up to this point both sides appear to have played normal developing moves. But in reality, you are virtually winning already, since your attack on the king's side is much faster, while white is actually quite restricted. Here is why. You are putting pressure along the central file, your bishop is actively applying pressure on this diagonal, and you are fully prepared to launch an attack against the white king. Typically, black does this by pushing the pawn to h5, and from there the attack comes very quickly. You have many powerful attacking ideas available. You can advance the pawn on the h-file, you can bring the knight closer to support the attack, you may even consider pushing the g-pawn forward to open more lines. In short, you have multiple aggressive options, while white essentially has none. The pawn on the e3, which at first glance looks like it helps white, actually does nothing meaningful in this position. It does not slow down your attack at all. Usually white tries the pawn to h3, which looks like a natural move to chase away your bishop, but in reality, this move does not change anything because white does not even want to capture the bishop, and the threat is only superficial. Let us imagine that I play some random move for black, and white actually decides to capture the bishop. If that happens, guess what? It completely opens up the h-file. Together with the bishop aiming along the diagonal, the rook on the h-file creates deadly threats. Not only that, but the knight is now hanging as well, since it is attacked by the pawn. Because of all this, you are going to win the game very easily and deliver checkmate to white. That is why white is not truly threatening to capture the bishop, which makes the move pawn to the h3 completely ineffective. Nevertheless, many players still go for it. At this point, you have plenty of attacking options, but the simplest and most direct approach is to exchange on the f3. After that, you are going for a straightforward checkmating plan by bringing the queen to the e5, aiming to swing across to the h2 for checkmate. And the reality is, white cannot stop this. The only attempt they have is to block the diagonal by pushing the pawn to the g3. But then, you simply push the pawn to the h4, tearing open the position completely. From there, white's defenses collapse, and the game is essentially over. White cannot capture here by moving the pawn forward, because in that case, you immediately deliver checkmate with the queen to the h2 square. So that option is off the table. And if white does not do that, then guess what? On the very next move, you are going to capture on the g3 yourself, completely tearing open the position around the white king. Your rook will also join the attack along the h-file, and that marks the beginning of the end for white. Within just a couple of moves, you are going to checkmate them. Let me also emphasize once again the true beauty of this gambit. What we just looked at is not some rare trap. These are actually the most common moves that white will play in this position. And against those very natural moves, the Englund Gambit gives you a straightforward and easily winning attack. That is what makes this opening so powerful and exciting to use. And that's how the Englund Gambit trap works. Fast, tricky, and very effective if your opponent isn't prepared. If you enjoyed this, be sure to like the video and subscribe for more opening traps and strategies. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.